Attention bobsled riders! You will soon be embarking on a thrilling podcast down the icy slopes of the Matterhorn, so please remain seated, keeping your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the bobsled at all times. Auf Wiedersehen! Hello, yodelers! We are the Matterhorn Yodelers. I am your host today, Peter, with my other hosts,
Jackie
and
Chiefus.
And today, we're going back again. We're going back. Yodelers! We're going back! That's right, we're going back to the past here. Recently, I was thinking, me and my Disney nerd self was thinking, you know what, we can talk about the 1964-65 World's Fair. And let me ask my yodelers here, what did you guys really know about the 1964-65 World's Fair prior to prepping for this episode?
You go.
It existed. Disney had some attractions there. That was it.
And that's about the extent that I knew, is that some of the attractions, I knew Small World, and I knew Carousel of Progress was an attraction that was seen in a World Fair. I didn't know that there was one World Fair that really showcased Walt and the company.
Yeah, I didn't realize that, all of the, attractions that I knew that were part of the World's Fair were in the same year World's Fair.
Even when we were discussing this podcast, I was like, oh, they're different years. And then I was like, oh no, there we are.
Yep. So, it's really interesting about how this all came about. So, basically, New York, they were like, okay, we want to do another World's Fair. They had just done one in the 30s, and they wanted to do another one so that they could hopefully get enough funding to build their park. And so they wanted to do the World's Fair in 1964-65. But the person who was in charge of it, he didn't want the cheapy attractions that were in the garbage shows that were in prior World's Fair, like the dancing girls or the
like
little
a showcase
kiddie rides.
Yeah.
He wanted
Eiffel Tower level.
Yeah, he wanted to put on a spectacle. So he came to none other than Walt Disney to be like, hey, I want to work with you on this. And so Walt Disney at the time was working on several attractions. And so Walt saw this as an opportunity to be like, well, I can work on these attractions and get other people to pay my bill for me.
Brilliant. And as I'm going through, to research these rides, these sponsorships that help create these rides, it was brilliant. I'll let you put your name all over this attraction if you help me pay for developing it. And it really worked out. And it was good for Walt because they don't do it anymore.
Nope.
Meaning the companies didn't make their money off of it.
And that was the thing. So if you look at the World's Fair as a whole, it was a failure. Attendance was low. They didn't get their money. They had tons of debt. The people, it was run very poorly. But for Walt, it was the exact opposite. It was the best thing. It literally moved Walt Disney to the next step in his company's progression. Disneyland had just been opened, and at that point, it was starting to run on itself. It wasn't running by Walt anymore. It was just functioning on its own at this point. And so Walt was trying to figure out what he needed to do. He was getting a lot of pressure to build a theme park on the East Coast, but he wasn't sure if the East Coast audience would be too sophisticated for a Disney park. And so when presented this opportunity...
And he put it in... No.
And so when presented this opportunity, while he was working on several attractions, many of which we will talk about today, he saw this as an opportunity to test the audience on the East Coast.
Because we on the West Coast have a sophisticated ability to understand the NISO rides.
No. The West Coast was not as sophisticated as the East Coast. That was
okay.
what Walt's worry was. And so this was a way to test that. So at the time, I'll talk about a couple of the attractions here. One, he was working on the Tiki Room at the time. And so that was one that he was trying to get a company to sponsor for the World's Fair. He went to Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola was initially interested and then backed off.
Wasn't it the Hawaiian airline? It was an airline that sponsored it.
In the theme park, yes.
Okay.
So the Tiki Room never actually made it to the World's Fair, but the Hawaiian Airlines did eventually sponsor it when it was built in the theme park.
I learned
itself.
that from a guest when I was working in the Tiki Room. He asked me, like, who sponsored it? When you worked at a theme park, you have random people come up to you
Yes.
and like, did you know? And you would be like, yes. Oh, the Haunted Mansion was the worst. Like,
Yes.
oh, did you know? No, that's not true. Well, I heard. No, it's not. I don't even interrupt them before they finish. No, that's not true. Try again later.
And yeah, very true. Very true. That does happen a lot as a cast member. Where guests try to like one up on a cast member, and it's like, okay, dude, like get on the ride.
Seatbelt.
Left
This
to
is a
right.
Haunted Mansion. Seatbelt.
Seatbelt.
Get out of here.
Over your mouth. Seatbelt over your mouth. That's where your seatbelt needs to go. So, getting back on track. So that was one attraction Walt was working on, but it did not make it to the World's Fair. One attraction that did make it to the World's Fair, but we're not going to really go into too much detail about, it probably deserves its own episode, is the Hall of Presidents show that he wanted to do. He actually went to Ford to sponsor the attraction first. Ford said no. They wanted to do something more about their brand and not just about presidents. Eventually, the show, there was a lot of
Nothing sells Ford than a bunch of like old white guys who stand up going, "I was a president."
Pretty much.
By Ford.
And due to a bunch of complications with the animatronic, that was reduced just to one president, which was Abraham Lincoln. And eventually, they got the Illinois Pavilion to sponsor Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. But today we're going to talk about three other attractions. The three other attractions, there were four. Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln was one. We're going to talk about the other three attractions that happened at the World's Fair and their influence on the parks today. So I'm going to talk about mine, which was the Ford Magic Skyway. So as I mentioned before, Disney wanted to do a pavilion with Ford, but they wanted to do Walt Disney wanted to do the Lincoln. They said no, so they started coming with other plans. One of the plans that they came up with was a plan to kind of have a driving across America ride, where you're in a vehicle and you're driving through different scenes of America.
So it's Test Track.
Test Track, correct. Basically.
Now sponsored by GM.
We'll get to that. So that went far until Chevy released their slogan or whatever, which was like, drive across America.
Oh,
which
no.
at that time Ford was all like, scrap that, we're not doing that anymore. So Walt Disney had to come up with another idea. And so they came up with this attraction about traveling through the history of
Automotive history.
automotive history-ish, sort of.
Okay.
It's very incomplete, you could say. Like it goes all the way back. Well, I'll get to that. So the pavilion opened. As you enter the pavilion, you're in this big queue downstairs. So it was a 2-level pavilion. The attraction was upstairs. On the ground floor, it was a queue. They had a bunch of cars there, showing off their new vehicles. And they also had dioramas of places from around the world. Why? I don't know. They just did.
It's filler.
It was just
You know what
like,
this needs? Diorama of Japan.
here's a fishing village in Vietnam. okay, all right, like, that's needed in the Ford Pavilion, sure. So eventually, after you get to the queue, you go upstairs and you get into a vehicle. They had a variety of different vehicles. Actually, before I get to the vehicle, as they were making the attraction, Walt Disney and some of the people that he worked with went to the Ford factory and saw how they made vehicles so that they could get ideas, and they saw how they saw the production line and how the vehicles, the assembly line, and that's what inspired them to be like, we can kind of turn this into the way the attraction works, how it moves, which it was a very unique ride system, never before created until this attraction, which I'll get into because it inspired another very popular attraction still around today. So
I never rode that ride.
Yes, you have.
Still around the world? No, I'm just
being smart. So you get into a vehicle. There were a variety of different Ford vehicles. The one that everyone wanted to get into was the new 1964 Mustang.
Oh yeah,
Ford Mustang.
That's right.
That was their a lot of people's opportunity to sit in these nice Ford vehicles for that time period, and so it was a great opportunity there. So there, you went on this. You start off and you're in this like kind of glass tunnel, and you're hearing the president of the Ford company talking about the attraction, how it was made by Walt Disney, and all that stuff, kind of giving you a heads up of what you're about to experience. And then you get taken back in time, all the way back to the time of dinosaurs. And you get to see
how paper's made.
No, like where oil.
Where we have oil to have functioning vehicles. Basically, that's kind of the point of showing off dinosaurs. And you saw a variety of different dinosaurs. And then as you progress to the ride, you get to the caveman and things like that. So you see the cavemen with cave drawings with them. They had a big...
Almost like Spaceship Earth.
There's a connection. Yes. So...
I could smell the burning of Rome.
That's right. It was burning Rome. No. So like you see the cavemen, there's a scene where they're like killing a woolly mammoth in a tar pit. Scene, like, oh yeah, it's a pretty graphic scene there, but goofy faces, very Mark Davis style of design. You can definitely tell this had Mark Davis all over it.
Those are no Mark Davis. He's one of like the Imagineers for Haunted Mansion and Pirates.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
or that group of Imagineers.
Yes. So, and then from there, you find the caveman who invented the wheel. And these are all animatronics, so they're all moving and they're all making noises and things like that. And it's kind of funny, like they have like this scene like of him like figuring out that how the wheel works, and then he has this funny scene where like he's standing in the back of this like wagon waving at his friends and his wife is carrying their kid on their back, and she's pulling the cart, and she's all like giving him like this dirty scowl, like, and he's like, waving to his friends. And then you get taken to this kind of like transition where you see the wheels progress through time, this animation of just different wheels, till you get to overlook a city of the future, of how the city and vehicles are moving all around you. You're looking down, and then you get taken off, and then
the anti-people mover city.
Sort of, yes. And so then eventually the ride ends. You get out, and then there's a whole display of other Ford vehicles. So a lot of you might go, well, that doesn't sound like anything we have today.
It sounds like Phoenix.
Yes.
Sounds like most Western states. The grid system of cars and streets and very little public transportation.
Pretty much. So basically, at the end of the World's Fair, Walt Disney had success with the other companies saying, hey, we want to bring these over to the theme parks. He thought that we could do the same thing with the Ford Skyway, but with different vehicles, not with Mustangs and other Ford vehicles, but another vehicle known as the People Mover. And Ford said, no, we don't want to do that. And so Walt Disney said, oh, okay. So he took his dinosaurs and went home. So he literally took the dinosaurs from the attraction, put them into Disneyland, and you might ask yourself, where are there dinosaurs in Disneyland? There's the prehistoric diorama, and that in between Tomorrowland train station and the Main Street main station.
You discussed this with your
Claude Coates.
Yeah, with the Windows episode we did.
Correct. Claude Coates was a big part of the attraction as well. He was a big Imagineer at that time. Go back to our Windows on Main Street episode to know more about Claude Coates.
Yeah, he's a pretty cool dude.
He's got 2 windows.
That's right.
He's got more than 2 windows because he's got one at Disney World. Too.
Yeah, but I'm referring to
Well, at Disneyland, yeah, he's got 2.
Big deal.
He's a big deal. So, so you can actually still see remnants of this attraction at Disneyland today in the prehistoric diorama that you can only see from the Tomorrowland train station.
Yeah, it's always that weird as you're riding the train and you're just all like, I'm looking at dinosaurs now? Alright.
I can just imagine Walt getting the rejection of like, no, and he just grabbed his dinosaurs and they're storming out their door.
You're a poopy head. No, you are. I'm thinking about dinosaurs.
It's funny though because there is video footage of them transporting these dinosaurs across highways.
Because it was
across
in
the
Queens.
nation.
It was in Queens, New York.
Yeah, it was in Queens, New York. So they had to travel all the way back to Burbank to be fixed up, and then to Anaheim to
clean off
to
all
Disneyland.
the bugs that were.
Yeah, pretty much.
I can't drive to Los Angeles without hitting all those butterflies.
Pretty much. So, so that is the remnants of the Ford Magic Skyway attraction. The building's all gone now, but we still have remnants of its impact today. So as I mentioned, Walt Disney wanted to introduce a new vehicle at Disneyland and use this attraction called the People Mover. At Disney World, people recognize this because it is a very popular attraction.
Oh, love it.
It's great.
It's the same sort of ride vehicle that just, it works really well. It's always moving, and it's really good with guest flow. It also helped inspire the technology behind the OmniMover system for Haunted Mansion and all those other... Haunted Mansion and...
you got Buzz Lightyear.
Buzz Lightyear's on it, Little Mermaid.
Spaceship Earth.
Yes. All of those attractions that have that OmniMover system kind of got its idea from this attraction itself. Now going a little bit forward in time, with the construction of Epcot, Disney wanted to make another deal with Ford and say, hey, we want to build this automotive pavilion in our Epcot Center park, and we want you to be a part of it. And Ford said, no. And so they went to GM. And you see, it's definitely a plussed up version of the same attraction, where you actually go through more history than just dinosaurs and cavemen. You go from cavemen to the Old West and automotive vehicles. Like, it's a full-fledged attraction. It's a really good attraction. I recommend anyone to go online, watch the old ride-throughs of the World of Motion attraction. Which then, as it ends to a giant plaza full of General Motor vehicles. So very similar to the Ford Magic Way ended as well. And also the ending to the Ford, last note, the ending to the Ford Magic Skyway ride ended with the looking over to a futuristic city, which was something Walt was actually working on at the time but wasn't ready to announce, was his plans to build a experimental prototype community of tomorrow. And so that was kind of like a sneak peek as to what Walt was working on behind the scenes.
That's funny because he did the same thing at Carousel of Progress.
Yeah.
He's like,
He was
well, why
thinking
not double
ahead,
dip? You
yeah.
know?
Basically, like I was watching this documentary where it talked about like, with Disneyland operating on itself, he was trying to look to his legacy, and so that's when he started working on.
I'm sure he also
Epcot.
has the diagnosis, or he's like, he could feel. I mean, it's 64, 65. He's, I think, is it 66 or 67 that he passes away?
67 is when he passed.
So, I mean, you have like 3 years, and I imagine
Well,
you
that
could feel
was
his
he was
health
starting.
is deteriorating as well. I mean, you could just feel like, hey, let's, you get to a certain age and you want to share what you know or to make the world better based on all your experiences. And, maybe he just said that, hey, this is the time to flip it on.
Correct, and you see the way the Walt handled the World's Fair, and you definitely see connections on how they designed Epcot Center. It's very similar to it was designed to be a permanent World's Fair. So that's what I have on my Ford Magic Way Skyway Tour attraction. J5th, why don't you tell us about the attraction you kind of did research on?
I worked on Carousel of Progress, and so you're like, the origins of it actually begin before we went to this World Fair. Originally, General Electric and Disney were partnering in the late 50s to have this kind of attraction show. It wasn't a ride, but it was kind of a walkthrough. And it was going to be a new kind of square or part, like how we have New Orleans Square. They were going to have an Edison Square at Disneyland. So Edison Square was going to be like kind of a hub between Tomorrowland and Main Street, where the Plaza Inn restaurant is.
Okay.
So you wouldn't have it there, and it kind of would go back there where you have like the parking lot for the cast members or whatever. And it was going to be just right above where they're going to have an addition there, which was going to be Liberty Street.
Mm-hmm.
So where you go to drop off, like you got the lockers.
Mm-hmm.
So that was going to be a street for Liberty Square, or I think that's what it was, Liberty Street. And then just north of it, you wouldn't be able to access it. You would have Edison Square. I think that's what I saw on the map.
I think Edison Square is where that street is, where the lockers are now.
Actually, no, it was Edison Street was.
'Cause I thought
it was going to curve down.
Was it?
And
Okay.
then Liberty Street was just below where it was.
Oh, okay.
And so, it was going to be in between Tomorrowland and Main Street in that little area
Yes.
where you go to the bathroom,
Okay.
that little spot. And so it was also so Edison Street was going to be kind of a hub that continued with like the theming of Main Street, but it was going to have a roundabout, and that's where the horse carriages would stop, and you would just have the automobiles would have another place to go around. And but the attraction was going to have like 4 rooms, similar to the Carousel of Progress, where they show different progressions of electricity and GM products, harnessing, and the attraction was going to be called Harnessing the Lightning. It sounds like a
Yes.
Metallica song.
I thought it was a great
the
name.
lightning! Whoa, whoa, yeah!
I think Disney should hold on to that for a future roller coaster ride.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
That is a harnessing the lightning.
Yeah,
Like a Hercules theme ride or a Zeus theme ride.
I think Metallica stole it. They have Ride the Lightning, but Disney's like, you know what? We're gonna harness the lightning. So this was actually really close to reality, where they were putting it on maps, and I was going through online. They had this pamphlet, and I'm horrible with sourcing. I didn't write it down. I think I did this at 10 or 11 o'clock at night doing my research. And I'm just flipping through this, but they had a 40-page notebook of what was going to happen. It was illustrated. It was ready to be put out there. And then GE's like, bloop, they pulled the plug, and they're like, we're not doing this.
Yep.
And so Disney's like, all right. But GE knew that the World Fair was coming to New York in '64, and they're like, you know what? Let's put this together. And so let's do this here, and we'll go from there. Because GE wanted to have their influence. I mean, the World Fair, you have people from different countries, different, the U.S. states. The biggest companies showcase their stuff. It was kind of like, what is the tech one that they have? What's the name for it? The E3?
Well, that's the video game one.
That's the video game one. But there's where all the electronic companies get together and they showcase everything. But that was what we did before you had the internet, the companies were like, this is what's going down. This is where we're going, and you want to buy into our stocks. I mean, this was huge promotional.
Absolutely. This was definitely a marketing tool for companies, countries, and states to show off what makes them great.
Yeah, and so General Electric, they said, we're going to have a pavilion, and it's a building, and it's like a ride. Basically, we're going to have a ride, and it was called Progress Land. And so Imagineer John Hench was inspired by a Broadway production of Our Town, in which the father figure narrates the story through several generations. And if you've been on the Carousel of Progress, that's what you're getting. You're getting the same narration, a father in different time periods. And so the show took place, functioned as a giant donut. So you get in there and you sit in your seat, and this donut moves from scene to scene, and it takes place in the 1890s, the 1920s, the 1940s, and the swinging 60s. If you've been on the ride recently, it's not like that. You get more modern 1980s laser disc.
That's right.
And these big giant headsets, and like, that's VR, and like, they were futuristic that way. We do have the Oculus Rift kind of VR, but it's still very hokey 1980s future.
Oh yeah.
Carousel of Progress of 1980s, which is appropriate for our Tomorrowland, the jabs that I like to do. And so they had this, and so like I said, the center stage, and you have 32 animatronics. And this is, like Peter was saying, Tiki Room was like, hey, we can do animatronics. We have computers, and then they can all do their parts. And I mean, these computers are very minimal compared to what computers can do now, but to the point where they were going to do human beings. It wasn't done. They did birds. Now we're going to do human beings moving and talking, and it's a show. It's a play. And throughout this play, you see the progression of the harnessing of electricity, really, of how GE has built these appliances that are influencing our life and progressing us through time. And of course, they get you to the 60s to show you, like, this is what it is now, or what we're going to be like. And they don't go too far. I mean, they're not going like, this is what the 80s are going to be like. And I'm like, we're up in space. And I mean, this is 64. We're, Kennedy's just giving a speech like, hey, we're going to the moon. And we're like, okay, Kennedy. All right. Wink, wink. Okay. This guy over here. And so the attraction had, like I said, 32 animatronics. They were building this at the time, and he may have been motivated by the Ford plants and seeing how it put together, because they learn, okay, with the human parts, we need to build the same parts and like have it be able to change in and out. Like, hey, we need to fix this. We can pull from different animatronics because they're all built with the same parts and make it easier. Kind of like a lot of cars today where, they got the same frame. Like, I drive a Frontier, but I can get parts for like the Pathfinder and then the Xterra, just because it's all the same. It just has a different shell on top. And that's what I think Walt probably learned when they were doing like the Imagineers. Like, hey, well, you need to use the same parts. This is going to be really expensive. And so, I mean, there was growth and learning with this groundbreaking animatronics. As we know, like, this leads to other attractions at Haunted Mansion and Pirates of the Caribbean. This is groundbreaking progress for the company, and I mean, just think, it's the 60s. You're seeing animatronic human beings singing and talking to you. That's really cool. Yeah. Now we're just cool when we see like a self-walking robot dog, and then we're all like, they're gonna kill us. Back then, these people are just seeing human beings. They're like, oh wow, we're gonna be able to tell the difference between humans and these animatronic robots.
Well, it's kind of funny. A side story about the production of Great Moments of Mr. Lincoln was that, like, they thought Mr. Lincoln was a real person.
Oh yeah.
Like, the way they made him, because they molded his face off of his own death
mask. Yeah.
And so, like, they made him look just like him. And a funny story is that there was, at one point during one of the test showings to the people funding it, one of the hoses broke.
Don't
The
use red.
hydraulic fluid.
You don't use the red hydraulic
He used
fluid.
red hydraulic fluid, and so it looked like he got shot. And so everyone,
So
people were all
sacrilegious.
like, "Wow, you even recreated his assassination!" And so they're like, "Okay, we need to change this."
Oh, that's the running joke. Like, you don't use red hydraulic fluid at great moments of Mr. Lincoln.
Sad.
Yeah.
Because at that point, when the hydraulic fluid is missing, you just see him go down.
Yep.
And he just like slumps over, and you're just like, this is dark.
I do not want to relive this.
New definition of dark ride. So yeah, like I said, with animatronics, this is groundbreaking. It's not been in the parks, and it's being shown here at this World Fair, and it finds success. I mean, there is, and also you have a great theme song composed by who? Dick and Bob Sherman. You know, the
Classic songwriters.
songwriters. They, and it's the song is there's a great big beautiful tomorrow, and boy, it sticks in your head. It's a great big beautiful tomorrow,
Yep.
just a dream away.
It was
bad. I can
Yeah,
that was
I did
good.
pretty good.
You did
Now
pretty
it's stuck
good.
in your head forever. Once you've been on the ride and they sing it over and over to you, and you can't get it out.
And they actually wrote that song in tribute to Walt Disney. It was written as if it was Walt Disney's theme song.
It really is.
Oh.
Like if you listen to the
I
words,
got
"Man
the
has a
chills.
dream,"
I got
that-
little goose
I
pimples.
know.
man has a dream, and that's the start. He follows his dreams with mind and heart, and then it becomes a reality. It's literally Walt Disney's theme song.
And I love, I go to Disney World, I love riding that ride. Even people are with us, it's like, oh, we're really going to ride this? And I was like, I love it. I feel good. And that was kind of the theming that they were going for.
He's good.
It is. And, I mean, there were great things that came from this. We got, for the first time, the wait time. Because the line was so backed up and it was muddling up things, they had to do the classic cube, but they knew how long it was going to take because it's a time show and you can fit so many people. And so at this point, you're going to get 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And so they added, for the first time, a wait time to a queue.
Wow.
And so that was one of the contributions to this is the classic wait time. How long have we got? You have 5 minutes,
All thanks to Carousel of Progress, which probably today does not have a wait.
There's not a wait time ever for it. When's it start? Well, the show starts in 2 minutes, so you got 2 minutes from this point. So this was all on the first floor, and then on the second floor of the Progress, you had, it was kind of like a dome shape, so they had, they took advantage of the concave ceiling and provided like dazzling sequences of thunder and lightning, solar flares, and spinning atoms, like just kind of just the future, and kind of that, you could just think of the sci-fi, kind of like hokey, black and white, kind of cartoonish. That's what I envision when I see it. And also you got to see a General Electric nuclear fusion demonstration, and I think of like Tony Stark's dad and like that big city, and it's like,
Well,
where do you think it's inspired
That's
from?
literally what, like they basically planted Howard Stark as Walt Disney in Iron Man 2 with that whole setup with this Stark Expo and all of that. That is literally like, they're literally mimicking Walt Disney at the time when Walt Disney just bought Marvel. And,
Coincidence?
and there was a theme song written for the Stark Expo, written by a Sherman brother.
Really, the Sherman brother did? Oh my goodness!
He wrote the theme song to the Stark Expo.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's a good little tip right there. And also, finally, as Peter has mentioned before, Progress Land also displayed Walt's vision of the future with a city, is what we know as Epcot, that he loved showing, and people got to see it, and kind of that vision for the city, like it's SimCity. Remember, you wanted to get that high density kind of futuristic city, and you wanted to put it in your SimCity kind of set town. that's what they were trying to move towards. There's that trend of the 40s and of the architects going, hey, we need to live in high density and kind of preserve Earth, and we kind of work here, but we play out here, and so that was, you know, what they were going towards, and so after the ride, you know, it moves to Disneyland. You know, it gets stationed there right next to Space Mountain as Tomorrowland is growing. So I'm sorry, Edison Square did not come to fruition.
Sounded cool though.
It does, Edison Square, and it goes along with the theme with Walt and his patrons and the American dream. And we'll get into this in the next episode podcast. So just, you know, Walt admired the great thinker and people who are looking to the future and progressing and inventing new things, and Thomas Edison was one of those people. And Thomas Edison's company later evolves into General Electric, and so there is kind of that respect towards, you know, as a fellow capitalist and growing of companies. You know, he was kind of probably one of his people he looked to and go, okay, what are they doing, or how do they do things, and plus, I mean, Thomas Edison, you know, brought us, you know, we're in the early industrial age, but really brought us into the electrical, you know, age, and it's exciting. And so I can totally see why he wanted to incorporate into his Main Street ideas. Like, yeah, this is old Main Street, but like, boom, it was electricity that started getting America on the world stage of like, yeah.
It absolutely did.
After Disneyland, 67, after Disneyland, Carousel of Progress moves to Magic Kingdom in 1975, about the time when Space Mountain opens up, around that time period. Just kind of that renovation of Tomorrowland, and Carousel of Progress is the oldest attraction at Walt Disney World to have been touched by Walt Disney. Mm-hmm. So you want to feel the presence of Walt. Ride a Carousel of Progress.
That's it. Mm-hmm.
It's there. And there's some things, and I'm stealing these lines because they're those kind of feel goods. I don't know who wrote them, but I heard them. I gotta say them. They're so good. Walt Disney, you know, with this ride in an era filled with fear and atomic warfare and the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is around this time period, just 2 years before, Walt's optimistic outlook, embodied by the Carousel of Progress, gave people hope for the future. You know, never though did one American's greatest storytellers forget that for any great society to forge ahead, it must first understand its past. And that just totally embodies the idea of Carousel of Progress. Not once was there a nuclear bomb going off and like sirens going off and like, hide underneath the desk! It's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow! And so that's what's just great. It's just a good, feel-good attraction that I feel still holds up, even though it's just not appreciated. And if you just want that theme song stuck in your head, it's a good one, I think. I say that until it's like 2 days later and you're like, please stop. And that's all I've got for the Carousel of Progress.
So there's one more, at least one more note that came to my mind. If you ride the People Mover at Magic Kingdom, you can actually...
You can see the progress.
You move by Progress City. I don't think it's the same model, but I'm sure it's a replica of the model that was used during the World's Fair.
I think the one that you see is the one that Walt... It was used on the television show.
That sounds right.
And when Walt passed away, they were just like, okay, they completed it. They're like, we have to finish this. This is what Walt was working in his vision. I don't think it was fully complete, the one that you see. And so, yeah.
And then, obviously, there was a successor attraction that happened later on in the 80s at Epcot called Horizons. People call it the Carousel's Progress is the next chapter of the story. Almost.
And you'll get those diehard people. When I worked at Mission Space, you're like, bring it back! And I'm all like, you know, orange side or green side? Because that's what you ask people when they get on the ride. Like, I totally blew that off. I was like, no, sorry, not indulging this.
What do you want?
All right. Well, thank you.
Fuerte or manos, más o menos, like, just in case.
So thank you for sharing about the Carousel Progress or Progress City. Jackie, why don't you tell us the last attraction that they worked on?
Well, while we're on the subject of annoying songs, let's go to It's a Small World.
It's a Small World.
So,
I love that song.
This doesn't bother me.
Like the song, it goes through these cycles where you like when you first listen to it, you're like whatever, and then you go to hate it because you're like, oh, this song is so annoying, and then as it gets continually stuck in your head and you can't get it out, you eventually go numb to it, and as you go numb to it, you learn to appreciate it and becomes your favorite song.
Yeah, I don't mind it. No, it doesn't bother me.
So, Small World was a little bit different with sponsors. So,
This is a funny story.
yeah, so Pepsi goes to Web Industry, right, or Web.
Is it WED?
Wed.
Wed. Okay,
WD.
yes. Yeah, Web.
Web is the new Spider-Man attraction at California Adventure.
So Pepsi goes to Wed and is all like, hey, we want you to do one of our, we want to sponsor a
For our
attraction
pavilion.
For our pavilion. And this was a year before the World's Fair.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And the person over Wed was like, no. And
That's cute.
yeah. Walt Disney found out, was furious, and went to Pepsi and goes, we accept the challenge, give us money. I now understanding hearing your guys' story, they had so many like rejections and like read things, and you want a company's coming to you and they want to like.
Well, I mean, how often are you going to get a company come to you and say, hey, we're going to give you all this money to make a ride that you don't have to pay for? Of course, like, you'd have to be dumb to pass
Yeah, the
that.
project managers were like, I don't want any more stress. That's what the project was like, I want to eat dinner with my family. And Walt's like, I don't care. I want you to pay for my ride.
Right.
Never ask the project manager if he has time.
So, Walt's like, yes, we're going to do it. They were on a very short time frame
Say the
to
least.
come up with a concept, and they didn't have a big budget.
Nope.
Well, if you look at the ride, it doesn't look like it had a big budget.
So the pavilion was going to be Children of the World was the original name, but they changed it to It's a Small World because of the song. It was the fair, let's see here, opened April 22nd, 1964. It's a Small World was a success. It cost 95 cents for an adult and 60 cents for a child.
That's a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
I mean, we just watched The Sandlot, and for like 90 cents, they got a baseball.
Yeah.
So how much would a baseball cost today? It would be like $10. So you're paying $10 to ride Small World. Boy, that would be a hard sell for somebody.
Yes.
This also, a lot of the funds went to UNICEF, which was the
UN's humanitarian.
yes, which was also a part sponsorship of the pavilion. That's why they involved children in the pavilion. So it was, there wasn't a lot of money, and so they had to pull a lot of Imagineers' creativity.
I feel like this is like the scene in Apollo 13 where they're like, I've got a tube sock, a tube, and this one machine. All right, let's build a rocket. That's what you're like, I got Small World. That's my tube sock.
Pretty much, yeah.
So, as probably most of our listeners know, Small World, it's mostly paper mache, kind of
Looking
dolls,
yeah.
and items. A lot of some of the big Imagineers on this attraction was Claude Coates. He did a lot of the painting. Mark Davis, Mary
I
Blair.
think Mark's wife was on that team, wasn't for the dolls.
Yeah, that's Mary Blair.
Mary Blair. Okay.
Mary Blair, yep.
Mary Blair. She's probably the reason why this attraction exists.
Yeah, she did.
She's the designer of the whole art design of the entire attraction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, she designed the way the children looked, how they were dressed, how the sets were designed.
This was probably her baby.
This was her baby.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Her and... Are you going to get to one more?
Bob Gurr? Or...
No, not Bob Gurr. Rolly Crump.
Oh.
Hers and Rolly Crump's baby. That was their attraction that they worked on together.
Yes. They also had a huge tower.
The Tower of the Four Winds.
Tower of the Four Winds. Sculpture. It danced and twisted in the breeze. So this was outside of the attraction. That was kind of the big focal point of it.
It was the weenie. It was to draw you into them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
There's a funny story about that tower. So, when it finally got built, it didn't get built the way they wanted it to. So when they built it, Walt was with, all his executives, and they're all telling Walt, "Oh, it looks amazing, it looks amazing." Walt goes over to Rolly Crump and he goes, "Tell me, what does it look like?" And he goes, "It looks explicit, it looks like something else." And he goes, "Well, better not, we spent so much money on it." So you can tell both Walt and Rolly were not fans of the Tower of the Four Winds, even though Disney fans today are like, "I wish they saved that thing."
And they're like,
Walt
no.
Disney, Rolly Crump were like, "That thing looks ugly."
He's rolling in his tube.
The Sherman Brothers did the classic song "It's a Small World."
Another song that will get stuck in your head.
Yes, and
They were good at that. They were good at writing songs that got stuck in your head.
so the
yeah.
Sherman Brothers were worried. So they had different versions of the songs they were presenting to Walt, and the Shermans did the version we all know. And they were worried that it was too simple and too repetitive. And Walt was like, "Nope, I like it. Move on."
There's
One of those executive decisions where it's like, nope, we're going forward.
Well, there's actually a funny story about before the Sherman Brothers were brought on. The original plan was that as you go through the ride, you would hear all the children sing their national anthems, and they realized that sounded absolutely horrible because you just hear all these different voices just singing different things at you, and you just had no idea what was going on. And that's when Walt was all like, "Okay, let me get the Sherman Brothers on this," and that's how they brought them out to the project.
Yep. So that's how we got "It's a Small World." Now, after the fair, it was a good success. "It's a Small World." They brought it to Disneyland, 1966. They did not bring the sculpture.
The tower, no.
They said they couldn't bring it for some reason, but
I was like, we can't bring it. As two dinosaurs roll down the road behind them. Nope, can't do it. Nah, I just can't do it.
yeah, exactly.
You want to know where that ended up? In the lake.
Really?
It ended up in the lake.
They just blow over into the lake?
They just pushed it all into the lake. So to this day, I don't think, as far as I know, they haven't pulled it out of the lake. It's
I'm
still
sure it's
sitting
disintegrated
there.
by
It's probably
now.
disintegrated by now, but when they demolished the whole World's Fair, it just went right into the lake.
Yeah. So it came to Disneyland. It was then sponsored by Bank of America. And let's see here.
Because Coca-Cola wouldn't appreciate the Pepsi
Pepsi.
sponsored ride.
Fun fact, they put a doll holding a red balloon. That is a tribute to Mary Blair.
Aww.
So, when you see the doll holding the red balloon, now you know.
I love it.
Yeah. That's what I have. Peter?
Also, the rides. I know. I've got all these random.
Yeah.
You watched a lot of videos. You're getting information, that we didn't copy and paste from.
So, the ride system helped inspire gave us what we know for Pirates of the Caribbean.
Boat rides.
The boat rides.
What was the rule? What was the rule? Small World's boats can work in Pirates, but Pirates' boats can't work in Small World.
Yeah.
I think that was the rule.
I think that's how
heard.
it works, yeah. It's something weird like that, yeah. But, yeah, because before Pirates of the Caribbean was going to be a walk-through wax museum attraction after the World's Fair, and It's a Small World happened, they're like, we can just do that for Pirates of the Caribbean.
Can you imagine Pirates without that nostalgic smell of the water?
It probably wouldn't have lasted.
Oh, no, it would be something else today,
It would be
without
something
a doubt.
else.
It would have been replaced. And we wouldn't have...
A walk-through attraction, how many of those are left? Not many.
Only in Paris.
Only in Paris.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, that's in general. I mean, obviously that's not all the facts, but that's kind of gives us a general idea of the importance of the 1964-65 World's Fair. It's something that we got a lot of key attractions that are still around today and are cherished by fans around the world, and Disney would be in big trouble if they announced that they were getting rid of any of them. In fact, I'm actually going to talk about that on our next episode on one of them.
These are very stepping stone attractions to greater attractions. These may not be the greatest attractions, but they lead
I
to
would say it's like a foundation to a lot.
the next step of Disney attractions that we get in Disneyland.
And so this was the events that took place at this World's Fair launched Disney into the new direction. It confirmed to Disney that the East Coast will be successful on the East Coast. It gave Walt more connections and more reputation with a lot of these larger companies, because at the time Walt Disney was still seen as this animator who made a theme park, not really a big name in terms of constructing something massive like Epcot, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. So this gave Walt Disney those connections to push the possibility of accomplishing his final dream that he wanted to do, which was Epcot. Unfortunately, we didn't get that, but in its place we have a permanent World's Fair. Well, at least we did. It's a little different now. But, yeah, so that's what we have for today. Thank you for joining us this week for the Matterhorn Yodelers. You can follow us on
Instagram. You can follow us on our Facebook. You can email us at matterhornyodelers@gmail.com.
Do we get any creepy voice messages on Anchor yet?
No creepy voice messages yet, but you can send us a voice message.
You could be the first.
Please.
I challenge you, listeners, to be the first.
Don't be explicitive. Just be creepy, alright?
Yeah.
Like Haunted Mansion creepy, alright?
You can send us a message on Anchor, so you just click on one of our links on our social media pages. It will bring you to our Anchor page, where you can go ahead and send us a message or record a message. We love to hear your voice.
We would.
Well, thank you once again, and Auf Wiedersehen. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the Matterhorn Yodelers. Please remember, before your bobsled comes to a complete stop, to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And remember,
there's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow, just a dream away. Well, it sounds pretty good. In fact, that's just the right spirit.